Hi, I'm Hannah Smith. I'm a publisher at Wiley in the Earth and Environmental Sciences, and I'm here to talk to you about getting your work published and discovered. In today's session, we'll talk about why publish, how to prepare your paper, find the right journal. We'll talk about the submission and peer review process, the benefits of open practices, including data sharing and open access, and finally, how to promote and maximize the impact of your work. So why publish? There are three main drivers here. First, recognition, acknowledgement of your contributions by peers and others. Career development, publishing is critical for promotions, grant applications, and ultimately to get more research funding. And the third, and maybe the most important, is around responsibility. The responsibility to society, to your institution, to your boss, if you're a taxpayer-funded researcher, to the general public, and then the biggest reason is the contribution to scientific progress. Now, what do you actually publish? Well, what you should definitely publish is work that advances the knowledge and understanding in a certain scientific field or provides a valuable resource. Original and significant results or methods, and reviews, particularly synthetic reviews. What not to publish? Anything that's out of date, and definitely don't publish duplications or even partial duplications of previously published work. And then there's this category of what to think carefully about. So preliminary results, these might be appropriate to publish, but the question is, are they useful? Or are they too inconclusive? Is it too early? A replication of results, but in a different system, again, this might be valuable, but it's too hard to say for sure. You'll have to assess it as it comes up. What you should ask yourself is, where could I best publish these results? And if you can't think of a place to publish them, then it's probably not the right result to publish. So now you've decided that you definitely have something to publish and you're ready to prepare your paper. A standard research article follows a basic structure. Each section is a building block within this overall structure, and it's important to be aware of the purpose served by each section as your article builds to its conclusion. Adhering to this structure will help you to begin the writing process and make your article easier to review. Here is the typical structure of a research article and the fundamental requirements for each section. So first, the title. Choose a title that best describes your work. You want something that's concise and free from jargon. Be mindful of search engine optimization. We'll talk a little bit more about this later on, but you're supposed to use keywords, relevant keywords, and remember that it should entice the reader. Then the abstract. This is a concise summary of the entire article. It is the first and often the only part of an article that gets read, so it's really important to get this right. Onto the introduction. Why did you do the research? Demonstrate an expert understanding of prior work in this field, typically via a literature review, placing the significance of your research among the existing literature. In the method experimental section, think of this as a recipe. The aim here is to enable the reader to recreate the research with the same outcome. How you did it, what materials, tools, and techniques you used. In the results and discussion section, talk about what was the result? What does it mean? Why does it make a difference? Where does it lead? Does it open other avenues for inquiry? Be careful not to summarize the entire article here. That's what the abstract is for. And the conclusion is, what's the take-home message? Make sure that you're guided by your actual research here, by the actual results. Don't stretch too far. Onto the references and the authors. The references are the references of other literature that you used, as well as data and software. The author list is critically important. Make sure that your author list is complete and ordered correctly. If you have a common name, you might want to add a middle initial to help distinguish yourself from others. And you should definitely sign up for an ORCID ID. Many journals already require this, but even if they don't, it's still really useful. It's a unique identifier that you can use for both submitted and published papers to help editors and readers identify you. So as I mentioned, titles are vital. Here's what makes a good research article title. It should be short, typically 10 to 20 substantial words. You put the keywords up front, and again, search engine optimized, which we'll get into a little bit later. You want to clearly state a key finding or ask a question and use current terminology. The title is used to entice your reader. In the past, people found papers by looking at print copies of the most important journals in their field, This just isn't true anymore, as I'm sure it's no surprise to you. And articles are being found via search engines, which means that they're starting at the article rather than the journal. And again, the title is critically important. Firstly, editors and referees do not always have the time to read your entire manuscript when making their assessment, or at least their first assessment. So if you can sell them the importance of your research in the abstract, you have a much better chance of making it through peer review. Secondly, due to abstracting and indexing agencies such as Web of Science, SciFinder, PubMed, and the list goes on, more people are going to view your abstract than read your paper. So if you can make it clear why your article is important, it's more likely to be found and read, and ultimately cited. So on to SEO, search engine optimization. This is what a search engine optimized abstract looks like. The title includes and leads with important keywords. Search term style keywords are used under the keyword section. I'm assuming somebody's going to be looking in, say, Google to try to find your work. And then the search terms are contextually repeated in a natural way throughout the abstract. When we're looking at the main body of the text, you want to apply the principle of chunking throughout your text to make it more readable. Keep the lowest level sections below 600 words, better 300 if possible. Again, keep it concise. On the left, this is hard to digest and remember if it's one big block of content. But on the right, this is easier to digest. It's easier to remember if it's under smaller sections. And use tables and information boxes to organize important details whenever possible. More mistakes are found in the references than in any other part of the manuscript. Sometimes an error in one paper is replicated in subsequent papers because authors simply copy the mistake into their list of references. Be sure to cite all of the papers on which your work is based. Make sure your citations are relevant. Citing a range of irrelevant papers can be a hindrance to the editor and does not work to your advantage. If you have published lots of papers before, try to avoid excessive self-citations. Most journals are international, so avoid excessively citing publications from one single region. And what else to keep in mind? Artwork is important. When preparing images, try to keep them as simple as possible. Use a single font. You want the highest quality image that you can find. On occasion, they may be printed. This is coming up less and less, but it's possible. So avoid needless shading effects, which might make them blurry. Some journals have color policies, which means that they may charge you for color printing. It's not very popular in this particular field, but sometimes that does come up. And of course, check to make sure you have permission to use the artwork. And then language. Keep the language of the writing as clear and simple as possible. If English isn't your first language, there may be a service to help you to edit or completely translate the text of your paper. There are many professional formatting and editing services, so you can present your work in the best possible way. And Wiley has the Wiley Editing Service, if that's of interest. So how do you get read? Well, first you need to be found. So this goes back to search engine optimization. This chart demonstrates how crucial search engines are in driving traffic to your paper. More than half of the traffic to Wiley Online Library in the past year came from search engines such as Google, Yahoo, and so on. Important that you put yourself in the position to be found. Something that can be done prior to publication. And this can be helped through search engine optimization. So SEO is the process of improving the ranking of a web page in your search engine's results so your article appears at the top of the list. You've written your paper, and now you move on to how to find the right journal for your paper. Think about what kind of article you want to write and the audience you want to reach before you begin the process of writing your paper. This will provide a focus for the whole writing process and ultimately help you choose the right journal. Identify your audience. Is your work aimed at the core participants in your specific field, or does it have a broader interest for communities at interfaces between your discipline and other disciplines? If possible, think broad. Be self-critical. Is your article really groundbreaking in the field? Would it really be best served by submission to the top-rated, most popular journal in the subject area? What are the other options? Again, what is the audience you're trying to reach? Is it that really broad audience that those top-tier journals reach? Or is it an audience that's specific to your field where there may be a better journal that everyone in your field reads that doesn't necessarily hit that specific impact factor mark. Ask questions. You can identify journals and possible target audiences by thinking about the following. Where do you read papers related to your research? What journals have you cited or intend to cite in your paper? What do your peers suggest? Where does your boss want you to publish? You should definitely ask that before you submit your paper. And other considerations. Review and publication timescales. Is a particular journal, does it take a long time in the review process? And this is critical work that needs to get out right away. Think about the quality of the journal, the other articles that you read beyond the metrics. Are the other articles in that journal the same quality as what you want your article to sit alongside? And also the likelihood of acceptance. Peer review can take some time, and getting rejected sets you back. You have to find another journal. So you want to try to submit somewhere where you think you have a really good shot of being accepted. Most importantly, look beyond the impact factor. Read the aims and scope for each journal carefully. Your article needs to be appropriate for that journal. With that in mind, the number one reason a paper is desk rejected because it doesn't fit the aims and scope of the journal. You want to make it past that initial screening, that desk rejection, where an editor-in-chief looks at your paper and says, this isn't right for our journal. In that initial screening, the editor or the editorial office assistant is looking, is everything there? Is the language understandable? If the journal has a data requirement, is the data there? They want to make sure that you follow the author guidelines as best as you can. And then that step may be done by an editorial assistant, but then the initial assessment, often from the editor-in-chief, requires that they read the abstract and the paper. Does it fit the aims and scope? And again, a plagiarism check. You want to make sure there's no duplication of previous work. If the paper doesn't meet the above criteria, the editor will reject it, meaning the paper will not be sent for peer review. You want your paper to go for peer review. This is the most critical part of the process, and this is the kind of core of scientific publishing. Peer review is the evaluation of work by one or more people of similar competence to the producers of the work, your peers. So what's being assessed in peer review? Well, first, suitability for publication. Is it the right aims and scope? Does it sit well alongside the rest of the content? Is it true and credible? Is it important? Is it relevant? Different journals measure these different factors in different ways. Truth and credibility, that's going to be measured at every journal in peer review. Importance and relevance, that will vary depending on the aims and depending on the kind of aspirations of the journal, depending if it's that top tier journal or if it's meant to broaden the scientific literature overall. In the peer review process, reviewers will be looking to see if you've effectively communicated your findings. Is it novel? Again, that's more of a question when it comes to a high impact factor journal, but there are some novelty requirements of different journals as well. And then again, plagiarism. You don't want to plagiarize. You don't want to be caught in this situation, but peer reviewers will absolutely check for that. So why is peer review so critical? Well, it verifies and improves research. It verifies and improves the interpretation of results, reasoning, presentation. It's critical, but it's constructive feedback, and it will make your writing, it will make your science better. And it also vets for new and additional ideas. It provides some level of control over the scientific literature and that validity of good science and raises the profile of science overall. So this is a look at what the peer review process looks like. This is different for different journals to some extent, but it's a pretty good overview and applies to most journals in the field. So the author will submit the article, and that article will first be assessed by the editor. And if it doesn't meet the aims and scope, or it's plagiarized, it may be rejected as a desk rejection. But most articles are sent on to reviewers, typically at least 2 reviewers. The reviewer sends it out, the reviewer does their assessment and then sends it back to the editor, and the reviews are assessed by the editor. They may go back to the reviewers to find out if further review is needed. Most often, they're able to make a recommendation on their own. So this is an overview of the peer review process. First, the author submits the article. The article is assessed by the editor. If it doesn't meet the aims and scope of the journal, or they find plagiarism, it will be rejected right out of hand as a desk rejection. Most articles, though, are sent on to the reviewers. Reviewers will then assess the paper and send the reviews back to the editor. In some cases, the editor may go back to the reviewer for further clarification, but typically they have the information they need to make a decision. On a rare occasion, the editor will decide to accept the paper as is based on the reviews. But more often than not, a positive assessment is a revisions required. Ideally, minor revisions, but often major revisions. In that case, the author will submit the revised manuscript and it will go back to the editor for their assessment. From that step, sometimes it's ready to be accepted as is. Sometimes it has to go back to reviewers. It depends on the level of revision that's necessary. So going back to that step where the reviews are assessed by the editor, if it's not outright accepted or if the revisions aren't required, then it's rejected. But let's imagine a scenario now where it's accepted. It's gone through the revision process. It's come back to the editor. The editor didn't have to send it out for review again. It didn't need anything major changed. They're happy with the author's changes, and they accept it. From there, it goes on to production. So it moves from the editorial office system, something like ScholarOne or editorial or EJ Press or GEMS for AGU, and then it moves into the production, and this is at the publisher. From there, it goes through the process to get into early view, get online as quickly as possible, and then it's published. There's lots of different publishing models. Some are continuous publication, like EGU, meaning as soon as an article is published online, that's the final version with an e-locator. Some journals publish an early version and then are included in an issue. But as long as you reach through that acceptance phase and the production goes smoothly, you're on the road to publication. So if it wasn't clear, peer review can be a bit brutal at times. So here are some tips to survive the process. The first thing is to accept the feedback as a learning experience. Reviews can be harsh. Typically, editors try to vet out any unconstructive or just critical feedback, but sometimes it does make it through and it's not personal. So accept that feedback as a learning experience. Remember that virtually no submissions are accepted unconditionally. We say here very few, but I think we can safely say almost zero are accepted without changes. Understand that editors and reviewers are trying to help improve your paper. They're making you better and your science better. Seek help with language and statistics if you need it. Asking for help is the best way to improve. And persistence pays. Answer questions, address revisions quickly. There's no comment from a reviewer that should be ignored. It doesn't mean you have to change everything that a reviewer suggests. Make sure you address everything that they raise. And celebrate your accomplishment. Your paper wasn't desk rejected. You went into the peer review process, you received feedback, you're one step closer to being published. So in many cases, your paper may not be accepted at that first journal. So what do? You go through this whole process, you go through the peer review process now, and you get rejected. And that can take quite a bit of time, but more and more publishers now are offering options where you can get to the next best journal for your work. This might be an equivalent journal in terms of quality, but different in terms of aims and scope. It may have different quality measures. It may be something that's looking more at sound science and less at novelty. It might be something that accepts data papers, whereas that wasn't something that you could publish in journal A. So there's many different reasons why you may go on to the next journal. Or you may have aimed really high for your first journal, for a journal that is the best known in the field, and you didn't really expect to be accepted, so you have to have a backup journal. And that journal B there are different routes to get there. You may have to start all over in the acceptance process, but more and more we're trying to help to get the reviews from your first journal passed along with the paper onto the next journal to streamline that process for you. So now moving on, you've been published, or at least you've written your paper, and you're thinking about open practices and what they might mean for you. So what is open science or open research? Well, the European Commission defines it as the following: a broad term covering the many exciting developments in how science and research are becoming more open, accessible, efficient, democratic, and transparent. It's a revolution, and it's driven by new digital tools for scientific collaboration, experiments, and analysis, which make scientific knowledge more easily accessible by professionals, the general public, anywhere at any time. When you think about that responsibility, social responsibility element of publishing that we talked about right at the top, the openness has an element there too, keeping the responsibility of the researcher to share as much as they can about their research and to advance the scientific discipline overall. Open research has a big hand in that. So these are the three core benefits of open research. And first is, no surprise, increased openness. This makes making your research, whether it's in the hard sciences or in the social sciences, more open, more transparent, and it's accessible for researchers. But not just for researchers, also stakeholders and potentially the general public. There's also the question of increased reproducibility. Now, in the earth and space sciences, much of what you do can't be exactly reproduced. You're not going to have the same extreme weather event twice. You certainly don't want an earthquake to happen in the same place with the exact same conditions twice. That's not really what this means. This is about creating a more efficient and effective research landscape. And whatever aspects of the research that are reproducible or best practice are captured so that the next person doesn't have to repeat the same mistakes twice. And lastly, increased accountability. Peer review and publishing is so critical because of that validity aspect, because it verifies the science, and openness increases that accountability even further. It protects the integrity and the overall reputation of research. Open research has 5 main pillars: open practices, open access, open data, open collection, and open recognition and reward. We're going to focus on open data and open access in this presentation. So I'm just going to touch on a couple of things on the other pillars here. So under open practices, this is about developing greater transparency in research communications and peer review. And one of the most exciting developments here is the preprint movement. Wiley, along with AGU, and many other partners in the field are actively involved in this area. There's ESOR, Earth Archive, the original archive in physics, bioRxiv, and many more preprinting places as a place where you can share early outputs of your work. There's also a movement towards transparent or open peer review as part of open practices, where we kind of open the black box of peer review and expose the reviews and the process with the hopes of making science better. Under open collaboration, we're also working to support researchers in article preparation and also that pre-publication sharing. So at Wiley, with our tool Authoria, you can actually share the submitted version of your work at the time of submission while it's undergoing peer review. And the same is true at ESOR. So it provides a greater transparency into that peer review practice, but also the opportunity to collaborate while your work is still undergoing peer review. And then open recognition and reward. So we talked about ORCID and the importance of getting a persistent identifier for your work. But one of the other major exciting developments here is around credit. So credit provides the opportunity for all of the authors to their work on the particular paper to be properly attributed to them. More and more journals are requiring credit, including Earth and Space Science, or encouraging credit or offering the option to their authors to make sure that all author contributions are reported. So on to sharing data. The kind of brief agenda here is we're going to talk about the reasons to share your data. What do research funders think about research data? What do publishers like Wiley think about data sharing as well? And what this means for you. So this is Katie LeMay. She's a senior researcher, a research data specialist at the Australian Research Data Commons, with the reasons you might want to share your data. Kate, in an article in Nature about fair data, describes how most people get into research because they want to make a difference, and that includes making your data as useful as possible. She goes on to talk about why this is good for researchers, because that helps you demonstrate the impact of your research when people reuse and cite your data set. It gets your name out there and can lead to new collaborations. So from the same Nature article, many scientific journals and research funders now require scientists to share their data. Nature, for example, recently endorsed the Enabling Fair Data Initiative, which AGU launched, which enables authors in the earth, space, and environmental science to share their supporting data on community repositories. Wiley is also a proud signatory of the Enabling Fair Data commitment as well. So what's the view from Wiley? We have a policy ladder across our journals for data sharing. So it's on this slide. The first policy, called Encourage, has no particular requirements, and for the most part, we're moving away from this. The second policy, called Expects, requires only a data availability statement. It doesn't require that data has been shared. The third policy, called Mandates, requires a data availability statement and requires data has been shared. We also have a fourth policy, which adds peer review to that, but it's not listed here on the slide. So the take-home, journals will increasingly ask you for a data availability statement and increasingly require that you share your data. So this time last year, about 50 journals from Wiley required data availability statements from every author. Now it's over 300 that require data availability statements. And we're aiming for half of all the journals we publish to require data availability statements in 2020. That's about 750 journals. As you can tell, Wiley's sort of core policy is around the expects data sharing rather than encourages or mandates. And that's because we cover a huge range of different disciplines, and there's different best practices depending on what discipline you're in. AGU has a mandates data sharing policy, which we wholeheartedly support in that case, which includes the data availability statement and that data is made available at a subject-specific repository. So let's take a look at what a data availability statement is. So here are a whole host of different examples. You can take a minute here to digest what these may look like. But I think the kind of core principle here is that they look different. And in different cases, you may have a different outcome in terms of the data availability statement. Ideally, we're looking for one like the one in the red box at the top, where the data that supports the findings of the study are openly available in said repository at this URL with the following reference number. And even more so, we would love to see that data cited in your references. That's increasing as a requirement and something that we're really trying to push as much as we can. We also see quite a few of the second box down where the data that supports the findings is available on request. This is fine and something that we support, but we really are looking for this in the case when data is not publicly available because of privacy or ethical restrictions, rather than just kind of a discomfort with sharing results. But included in this list is also that research data is not shared. And in the expects world, that is possible. So on to open access and licensing. What is open access? Well, open access is built on the principle that the world's knowledge is more powerful when it's shared, that research needs to be available to other researchers, professionals, and the public so we can maximize the good that research does in the world. Open access means that the publication is immediately, permanently, freely available online, and anyone can reach it. Open access articles are also published under the terms of a Creative Commons license, which permits use, distribution, and reproduction. There are different kinds and flavors of Creative Commons, but that's the core of all of them. So there are two routes to open access, and actually there are four, but we're only going to talk about these two. And really, when we're talking about open access, we're mostly talking about gold. So I'm going to start actually with green to talk through that and then come back to gold, which is the crux of what we'll talk about going forward. So green open access is actually not paper being immediately, permanently, freely available. Instead, it's that the author self-archives a version of the subscription article in an online repository or website, and there's no charge associated for it. Self-archiving requirements vary depending on the article version being archived. They vary depending on the discipline and from journal to journal, but typically authors can archive the submitted version on acceptance and the accepted version with a 12 to 24-month embargo. But again, that embargo period varies. You may also be able to archive the submitted version at the time of submission, as in the case with ESOR or Authoria. These articles are also published with a standard CTA, copyright transfer agreement. So then moving back to gold open access, which is really, again, the crux of what we're talking about here. This is where the author pays an article publication charge, an APC, and the article is immediately freely available online. Wiley offers two different routes to gold open access. So we have a fully open access journal where every article is published open access. So that's Earth and Space Science, that's James, that's GeoHealth. We also have subscription journals which offer online open. So that's an open access option that exists within the subscription world. That's JGR Atmospheres or Tectonics. And again, for these papers, there's a Creative Commons license used. As I mentioned, there are different flavors of Creative Commons license. I'm not going to go into each one of these in detail, but in all three, the author retains the copyright and there's various levels of reuse that are allowed. OA has come a long way since the early 2000s when there was the Budapest and Berlin declarations. And over the years, the pressure from funders and policymakers has continued to grow, and there are now more than 800 policies in place globally. Open access in research articles is more and more in the news. This has increased even further because of the COVID-19 global health crisis. and it's highlighted the importance of access to scientific research and publication under the appropriate licenses. This is a look at the global OA policies, which we're not going to go into great detail, but they're color-coded here. The major takeaway here is that the green policies, which are in the kind of bright green on this slide, are prevalent in Africa and in Mexico and other parts of the world, whereas the sort of teal color, which is there's some established green policy with some gold, that's really what's dominant in the US. You'll see the orange, which is the gold open access, or maybe that's gold, which is the gold open access policies. Those ones are really prevalent in Northern Europe and pretty much exclusively in that region. But again, in the US and in other parts of the world, we're seeing this a general kind of preference for green OA with some gold emerging. So a little bit here on the benefits of gold open access. I think we've touched on a lot of this, but these are the 5 reasons that you might want to consider it. Rapid publication. The article, again, is immediately freely available to read, share, and download. It still meets all the high standard, rigorous peer review. We don't see any difference in our portfolio in terms of quality when it comes to open access. And it's also the widest possible dissemination and the most control for the author with the Creative Commons license. This is from an analysis done by Heather P. Wauer, a researcher and open access advocate. She has a bachelor's and master's degree from MIT in electrical engineering and 10 years of experience as a software engineer and a PhD in biomedical informatics. Heather and her colleagues in their study found that which is called the State of OA, a large-scale analysis of the prevalence and impact of open access articles, helps us understand how much of the literature is open access. So they found that 27.9% of all journal articles are open access, and that papers that are freely available obtain 18% more citations. That's pretty powerful. But this is even more powerful, that articles published open access are downloaded 97% more often in their first year than non-open access work. This means increased reach and a boost in citation potential when your research is at its most relevant. Universities are beginning to reward openness as well. So this is a quote from UCL, where open research practices are rewarded in promotion decisions. And openness will be equally valued in recruitment, probation, PDR, reward, and promotion. So more and more, we're seeing universities with a strong preference towards openness. And open research isn't just the future, it's here and now. And for Wiley, it's a critical part of what we do. And we want to support the open choices that you want to make. We have a number of tools which help you to comply with the open access policies and pick the right open access journal or open access policy or funder for you. This is part of our author services suite on authorservices.wiley.com. All right, so you've written your article, you've found the right journal, you published your work, you maybe chose open access, you shared your data, you might have shared a preprint version. Now, how do you promote and maximize the impact of your research? Well, you want to set yourself up for success. You want to increase the discoverability of your paper with SEO and your ORCID ID up front. After you're published, though, you want to share it wherever you can. No one is a better advocate for your work than you are. Share your paper on social media. Don't be shy. Use Wiley's article share or content sharing services. And don't forget to update your institutional profile with your latest publication. Next, talk about your research a lot. Maybe present your research at AGU Fall Meeting or other meetings. Network, present, make the most of all the conferences. Again, don't be shy. Talk about your work. No one is a better advocate for your work than you are. And content is king. Maybe create a short story of your paper. There's lay summaries, infographics, graphical abstracts, video. All of these services are gaining in popularity as a way to make yourself stand out. So Wiley has a number of different tools to help you do this, from SEO to conferences, publicity, networking, multimedia, email. We talked about a lot of these, but feel free to look at wileyauthors.com to find out more about different promotional tools to help you ensure that your work gets seen, read, and cited. Thank you. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. We're here to help you and support you through the whole process.